All right, welcome back to the Share Your Why podcast. I'm so excited to be here today with my good friend, Patrick Meehan. Patrick, thank you so much for being with us. Really appreciate it.
Dude, of course. Thanks for having me. This is so fun.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. Patrick and I actually met at NC State a couple years ago. We both happen to be like very into video production. It's kind of our background. I remember the story went that some people down the hall, he was actually living like down the hall from where I was, and he and I like never talked to each other directly, but then some people down the hall said like, "Hey, there's this other guy who's kind of into video. Maybe you should talk to him." And somebody was telling Patrick the same thing. And then we ended up just happened to like sit down next to each other at like a dinner one time. Do you remember?
Yeah, it was at the bistro, and it was like my favorite thing, like the late night like thing after 9 p.m. And we were with a bunch of people and we just started talking, and I was like, wait, like you're actually in the video, because some people are like, oh, I like video, and they just like have a camera and they don't really do much with it. But we started talking equipment and just different things. And I was like, oh wow, Thomas knows what he's talking about. This is so fun.
And I had the same reaction. Yeah, it was a ton of fun. Really excited to be here with you today, Patrick. And, we're going to be talking about all sorts of really fun things. Just to introduce Patrick to everyone else, Patrick's a third-year student here at NC State, majoring in communication media, and actually started a company called Patrick Meehan Productions back in 2013. It's been expanding over the years. He's had the opportunity to travel across the United States, other places in the world, creating films for different nonprofits and companies. I can attest that those films are absolutely fantastic. And he says he's hoping to continue his business out of college as well as gain a career in the television production industry. I met Patrick at NC State and actually ended up making him a job offer about a week later. And we ended up working together at 9 Miles Media, our digital marketing agency based out of downtown Raleigh, for a couple of years. Yeah, excited to talk today. I really want to focus our conversation around two different things. The first one is, what do you do to get started when you have an idea? And the second one is, how can building relationships and fostering relationships with people really help you to get started? I'd love to kind of hand it over to you. Feel free to take a couple minutes and just for the benefit of everyone, introduce yourself, where you come from, what motivates you, and kind of how you made it to where you are now.
I was a freshman in college, brand new to Raleigh. I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina. Like, wow, I'm living on my own for the first time. And Thomas is like, hey, come down to our office in downtown Raleigh. Come check it out. I want my older brother, Ben, who runs the company, to meet you. And I was like, okay. Had no idea what to expect. Showed up and we talked in the 12th floor conference room, which oversees like everything in Raleigh. I felt like I was up in this fancy business world, like literally my first week, and it was crazy. And then Ben like walked me down and like basically like offered me a job, and I was just shocked, and I was like, what the heck? Like, it was just so cool that you guys like put your faith in me, and like we have an incredible relationship now because of that, because of what happened 2.5 years ago. So yeah, I just think I compliment you guys for seeing potential, which I didn't see in myself at the time, which obviously I don't know, is true just by how much I've grown working with you guys, and I just appreciate it.
Of course, man, that was always such a fun experience. I knew instantly, and even just back then, you might not have realized it, but you were doing a great job of just sharing your work and sharing your why as well. Even in like the first interaction that you and I had, and then your portfolio online and everything, it just became immediately obvious just how stellar your work was, and also the reason behind what you were doing it. And that was really what led us to try and make that decision. So, yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Appreciate it. So I've been working on that portfolio since like 2013. I was 13 years old. Actually, I'll back up. I was in 7th, 8th grade, and I was on Instagram. It was like brand new at the time, and I was just posting a ton of selfies of myself, a ton of pictures, very all about me. And my mom, being the wise woman she is, was like, Patrick, what are you doing? Like, you shouldn't be like posting this stuff. It's self-loathing. Like, go out. Here's my camera. It was a Nikon D40, and go take some pictures of nature, whatever you want to do. So I did that. I just fell in love with how a camera works and the fundamentals of a camera, whether you're shooting on auto, which I did for the first year, or learning how to manually shoot with aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. And I was like, wow, like there's so much you can do with a photograph. And got into that at the age of 13. I did my first like family portrait session for, I think it was like $20. And it was like a hour session for $20. It was a lot of fun. My dad still has a picture of me from that moment, which is so funny. Look back at swoopy hair Patrick at the time, and I was so young. It's crazy. But I give a lot of props to my dad because he runs his own business. He's his own practice as a chiropractor. And so he really showed me like, hey, like if you work hard, you can really create something out of this. And so through high school, I kind of worked my way up to maybe doing like more family photos to senior portraits. And then I was like, wait a minute, like video is a thing too. That seems like cooler. So how can I transition into that? So I got a new camera and started working into that, and eventually got a job, which is crazy, with Elevation Church, which is the church I was attending at the time, which if you guys haven't heard of it, it is a church that is massive. They have like 13 locations, and they have like 25,000 people in attendance every single week, which is a lot, and across all their campuses when obviously COVID isn't happening. But I got offered a job to do sermon editing for them during the week during the summer when I was 16, going into my junior year of high school. And the guy who offered it to me was named Stephen Lester, and he just saw, I guess, that potential in me. And I had no idea what I was doing. I've never used Premiere Pro before. That's how I learned the software. And I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but later I find out that these sermons that I'm editing will be broadcasted on TBN and go out to 500,000 people weekly. Huge audience, the most I've ever edited for in my entire life to this day. Which is just very, very cool. And I also got into the broadcast side of things as well at Elevation, with calling different camera shots and kind of doing what I have a passion for now with like sports and live production with that. And then when I was a junior in high school, a guy named David Johnson had a company called Sound Images. They are a nonprofit, and they create videos for charities and churches. And I did an internship with them over the summer, and they are all about how can we create like professional films for people who can't necessarily afford them, but they have incredible stories to share. We told stories of a church in Charlotte who planted a church in Ukraine, who then like gets, and that those people get to go out into Ukraine and tell and reach people who people in the United States can't reach, or how this water cleaning company in Africa is literally like risking their lives by going into like dangerous places to give water supply, or just other incredible stories that the team would go out and shoot and I would come back and edit, and just learn the art of storytelling. It's a lot harder than I thought. I quickly learned that everything I made was not good. And there were times where I would make an edit, and David, my boss, would be like, hey, it's good, but not what we wanted. Do it again. And he said that out of love and like wanted me to grow. And so I did it again, and I learned from my mistakes and worked really hard. And I think those two jobs in my high school career are what really propelled my workflow and my ability to like think of an idea, shoot it, edit it, and create a story out of that. When I got to college, there were just so many opportunities, like working with 9 Miles or doing weddings, or other things that really are just a lot of fun and a lot of personable with and getting to meet a lot of people. And so that's pretty much the gist of my story. I could go into a lot of detail, but we could be here for an hour. And
thanks so much for sharing. I really appreciate it. And you mentioned that your dad's an entrepreneur, and that definitely heavily influenced you. I know I've heard you mention that before.
Absolutely.
I'm curious, like, what were the biggest things that you took away from, having somebody in your family who was an entrepreneur? Like, what were the biggest things you learned? Obviously, not everybody has that opportunity. I can definitely relate to that being a fantastic thing. But even for people who haven't had that opportunity, like, what were the biggest things you took away from it?
Sure. Yeah. I think one of the biggest things that he told me is that you can accomplish this if you really have a passion for it, but it's going to be hard. Starting your own business is tough, and there are so many loopholes and things you have to jump through in order to get to where you want to be. And my dad, he has failed a lot in his business, but he's also succeeded a lot in his business, like anyone who owns their own business. And so he was able to help me really show me where he like struggled when he first started off and where he excelled. And so I didn't have to go through those same failures. And also, obviously, his business at a much bigger scale than mine was at the time, but he still like gave me his heart and soul and like treated it like it was a multi-million-dollar business, which I appreciated from him. Like, if you work hard, then you can get this thing to where you want it to be. And it's still obviously not where I want it to be. I want to one day create a team and hire people and expand more. But right now, I'm pretty happy with it, and I've had a lot of fun doing it over the years.
That's awesome. I'd love for you to dive into a little bit more of your vlog and the initiative you guys started with when you came to state. I'm curious to hear like what led to you getting started with that and what were like the biggest things you learned throughout that whole process.
So I started this vlog my freshman year. It was like springtime because, you know, it was the winter, not a lot to do. Was trying to figure out like how to get creative. Classes were slowing down. I just started to document my everyday. I would just kind of walk around campus with a camera in my hand. I would hold it up and just talk to it. And people looked at me like I was insane. They like, I remember being like just trying, like super uncomfortable in front of a camera, didn't like the sound of my voice, all the usual stuff that everyone has like struggles with when they first start, but eventually realized, hey, like I'm never going to see these people again. I'm doing this because I love to vlog and I want to look back at these videos that I create one day and like remember them. And I want to see these experiences I share with my friends. And honestly, it was one of the like most fun things I think I've done in college is create 5 or 6 vlogs every single week. I would say like motivation is a really big part of that. It's like, why are you choosing to do what you do? Like there are lots of big motivations in life for people, like money. Like obviously YouTube is not going to pay me to make these vlogs. So money's out of the question. Am I doing this for people, like for fans? That definitely was a question at first, like in my head. But honestly, I don't think that would have driven me enough to do it because I was only getting like 400-500 views, which is great. But you know, it's not like thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands like how some of those YouTubers have. So, and then it came down to myself, like, do I enjoy like looking back and watching these and like, sharing these experiences with my friends? And that's the reason why I would stay up till 4 a.m. every night editing these videos and just having like so much fun making them because now I can, it being 2 years later, look back and laugh about those times that I wouldn't necessarily have remembered.
I really just want to say thank you because like you might not even realize, but you like going out on a limb and doing that yourself then in a big way led to do something like this myself. Yeah, so I really appreciate you doing that. And also just really appreciate, I know you were one of the first people that I came to with this idea and you helped me out in a huge way, just like figuring out like we were talking about, like what were my motivations for doing it and how like technically was I going to make it happen and help me get over some of that stuff about like seeing myself on camera and my voice on camera and stuff like
Right.
that. So
Yeah.
yeah, I just really want to say thank you for all that help. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Yeah. And I think that's a really big part of, like, you could say the circle of life. The reason why I could do that is because someone poured into me and like showed me the ropes. And now, like, not that I was showing you technical stuff, but I learned a lot from that experience and was able to point you in like in a different direction. And you'll do that with someone down the road too. I'm sure of it. As you're already creating these videos, so people will be impacted by them, and I'm excited to see what they turn into.
Yeah, for sure. Can you talk for a second? I know you also started a podcast, over the course of quarantine, and I'm curious, like from the vlog and from the podcast, like what is the number one biggest like key takeaway you have, like biggest thing you've learned?
The podcast, I called it "Keep It Up." So when in March I was coming back from spring break and I just heard that school was going to be out for the rest of the semester. It was going online. I was going back to Charlotte and just didn't really have a lot to do. And I'm someone who just that's uncomfortable. Like we live in an extroverted world and it turned into an introverted world for the first time pretty much ever. And people didn't have anything to do. People were going insane. And I was one of those people going insane. And I was trying to figure out like what is something I can do that like doesn't necessarily like further like my image but furthers other people's, like what's something that I can do to like capture the attention of other people and highlight people who are doing incredible things in the world. And so I started a podcast called Keep It Up. And it basically, I've had some musicians on there. I've had one of my buddies who's just a normal guy who he just got to tell his story, kind of like what you're doing with me right now. And it's just been so fun to talk to people and hear like the incredible things that they're doing in the world, whether it's transitioning from college to adulthood and how they're handling that, or how they had 30,000 monthly listeners on Spotify and now they're at 4 million over the course of 6 months. Like just and every kind of story compiled into this one podcast. And it's really cool to hear from other people and not necessarily like myself be talking, because I'm only so interesting and there's other people out there who are much more incredible and fascinating than I am. I would say one of the biggest key takeaways that I've learned from the vlog or from the podcast is listen first and ask questions later. Like, people have a lot to say. So it's easy to come into a conversation with like a goal that you have in mind before you even have a conversation. But in conversation, like, incredible things can happen, and like a conversation can shift and it can turn into something that is way better than you initially thought. So I've just learned, whether I'm interviewing people on a podcast or in video or just talking, like coming in with an initial idea, like that idea is going to change and it's probably going to get better than you originally thought, because like me or you, like we're one mind, and when other minds come together, like incredible things happen. And I remember talking with this guy named Brendan Abernathy, and he is a musician who's just getting started, and I'm about to release his podcast next week. But he like came in and he was playing his guitar and telling stories with his guitar, and I thought that was fascinating, and I was not planning on that at all, but it would just created so much like rawness to the stories that he was sharing, because the guitar is what made like is what transformed his life. And that's just a small example of like, wow, like I had no idea that was going to happen, but like he like just that was so natural for him, and it just made the conversation so much better. So yeah, I would say that's one of the biggest takeaways for sure.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And I really enjoyed checking out the podcast episodes every time they come out. Always just really cool perspectives. So, Patrick, here's the fun question. How has your why impacted your story?
Yeah, that's an incredible question. My why like started for a love for video and production, but that's not what it is. My why turned from that into a love for storytelling. Like you said, started to make a vlog and started to make it about other people and not myself. And eventually, like, I wanted to translate that into how I live my life. Like, video production has been one of the biggest parts of my life, and like the best way of showing me that, like, hey, like I don't necessarily need to make life about myself. Like, being behind the scenes is so important to me. Like, I think that's like why I like started creating things, is so I could like highlight other people. As you can see, it's kind of just like a constant theme, like from like the podcast to vlogging to like storytelling or doing stuff for like nonprofits and things like that. I think like the world is driven on love. That's why I love doing smaller projects and that like are more meaningful. Like when we went to Arizona and we told the story of this homeless shelter that was doing incredible things and like finding homes for all these people who were just in a rough part of their life. I don't know. I think like for to share those stories instead of necessarily like talking about like, like how a business has grown or something like that, is just it's just so fundamentally, for me personally, is just really eye-opening, and I enjoy doing that. Those kinds of stories are what like keeps me going and keeps me wanting to keep doing video, and I would say that that's my why.
I love that. Yeah, I always ask that question. It's like, what is it that gets you out of bed in the morning? Like, what is it that gets you through the really tough stuff? No matter what you decide to pursue in life, at least in my experience, like you've got to be doing it with a purpose or with a why, because that is what is going to sustain you when it gets hard. And there's always
Right.
going to be parts of it that get hard. Speaking of that, like I'd love to hear, we've been talking about a lot of good stuff, and I really want to take time on the podcast to talk about some of the difficult parts, or some of the parts where we can be more transparent or more vulnerable. So we'd love to hear, like, what have been some of the difficult parts of your life and your story, and maybe what are some things you're still working on too?
I would say immediately one of the hardest things is finding a balance with my friends. When I first started vlogging, for example, it can get annoying when I'm always filming stuff, or always like having to have a camera in my hand, or even like always having to work. Like when I had to go in and work for either in high school, and it was all my summers, or go in and not be able to balance my classes with my friends with video production. That's like the behind the scenes stuff that really is just not pretty. And I like had late nights and lost sleeps, and but to me it's all part of like the learning process of how you can balance your life to encompass all these things that you're passionate about. And one thing I learned is like, I can't be passionate about everything. I had to drop the things that weren't necessarily as important to me. For example, last year I gave like 2 tours a week, and I love being a tour guide at NC State. It is so fun. But I had to drop that to only 1 tour a week because there's just no way I could, have the time to do that and, and give it all into everything that I was doing. Or I wanted to explore the video production side and do a full-time position or a part-time position with them. And I just couldn't do it because I was working for 9 Miles, and I was in a season where I really wanted to explore video editing and not live production. So just trying to balance that is difficult, but I've slowly started to learn and figure that out. Obviously, there's a lot of learning to do still, but it's been cool to see what matters to me most and kind of like putting that at the top and then slowly making time for other stuff. I would say another thing that's really tough also is like trying to serve my clients in the best way possible and always be there for them because I'm so busy. Like maybe I'm not the best at responding to emails or, getting back to them immediately, and they deserve that as someone who is hiring me for their services. And so that's something that since I was a senior in high school and started to do bigger projects like big weddings or working with bigger companies, like I've really been trying to work on just getting back to them in a timely manner and, being like, hey, like I'm a student, but also like I'm going to be all in and work hard and make this the best video you've ever seen. There's definitely some highs and lows in everything, especially video production, but I'm happy to talk about those all day long because that's what's really helped me grow most.
I really appreciate you sharing. I definitely relate to a lot of those things you just said, especially when it comes time to like figure out the rank list of priorities, right? Or figure out how to balance the different things you want to do. I think you and I are definitely people that from the beginning we related to each other a lot on wanting to do a lot of different things. I think you and I both really enjoy the variety of doing so many different things, but it gets to the point where you're have yourself too thin and it just doesn't work. So I'm curious, like for my own benefit, have you found anything that works well in terms of figuring out what your priorities are, or a way to do that, or a way to make sure that you're balancing your time?
Definitely. I mean, it could be something simple like creating a schedule on Google Calendar and just sticking to it, or it could be learning how to say no. Like, I think that's a really tough thing that I have struggled to learn. Maybe like someone asking me, hey, like I was really hoping you would do this, and you responding with, hey, I know and I'm really sorry, but like that wasn't what we agreed on. And that's just, I just can't do that for you. And that's like, I've saying no, it's not like I love being able to please people and exceed expectations, but sometimes like that's just not going to happen in a project. I would rather exceed like my friends' expectations with the quality time that I spend with them and the love that I show them over the love I show for a client, because that's just what I choose to prioritize in my life. And so, yeah, I mean, that's one of the biggest things for sure.
I love it. Yeah, I appreciate it. I'd love to kind of dive into this topic of, getting started, like figuring out where to start. You have a new idea, something you want to try and do, and where do you start? One thing I've been super impressed with from you, just like this summer, is I know you've always been talking about really wanting to get your pilot's license, or
Right.
especially to get your drone license. You and I both love flying drones. I know it was kind of like on the back burner for a while because we would talk about it, and it was like, oh well, haven't quite gotten to it yet, but maybe next month we'll get there. But then this summer you finally just said, screw it, I'm gonna go do it, and you did over the course of, I think, like, what was it, 3 or 4 months, right? You got your pilot's license, which
Yeah.
is
I
freaking
got in just
awesome.
under 3 months.
Yeah, kudos to you, man. So I would love to hear, like, what was it that finally kind of unblocked it for you, and how did you bring everything together to make that happen?
Yeah, great question. I had a original plan for this summer, and I was actually working very, very hard for it. I am a man of faith and love God, and was going to serve at a Young Life camp, which is a ministry that I'm very passionate about, and was going to be there all summer. It was at a camp called Trail West in Colorado. I was super excited to get to grow there and like serve there and meet people. But obviously, when COVID-19 came about, it shut down camps all across the United States and all across the world. And it shut down much more than just camps. It shut down businesses and like it changed lives. And I was like, oh my gosh, like Patrick, don't be selfish. Like other people's lives are people are like losing their jobs and like families are like struggling right now. And I like am just not being able to go to camp. But naturally was like, what else can I do this summer? And so like you said, I've always wanted to get my pilot's or my remote pilot's license. And so I started to do that so I could fly commercially. For those who don't know, you have to take this course and take this test with the FAA in order to get to fly commercially and make money off of your drone footage. And for me, that was, I want to use a drone shot in a wedding film, and I can't do that legally unless I have this license. So I started going through the training and just fell in love with aviation. It was so cool. And if you have not checked out anything with aviation, you should, because it is awesome for those listening. But I was like, wow, like I have a free summer. I did this in about a week. Like I wonder how it would cost, how hard it would be to get my pilot's license. And I just did a lot of research and explored that. And it probably has been one of the most rewarding and best things I've ever done, and most fun things I've ever done, just by working really hard this summer to obtain that license. And I know your brother flies, Ben, and he like really talked to me through a lot of the stuff, like how we said, networking and having relationships with people. Like he helped me like figure out what would be the best path for me to take with my training. But overall, like doors are going to open, doors are going to shut in your life. And like I think someone told me right after I found out that my camp was closed, or for the summer, that like, hey, like this door is closed but another one could open. And it did. And I had a lot of fun and stayed in Raleigh this summer and just got to be with friends and work on the license. And it was a great summer. And now I could see myself actually doing something in like the future with aviation, maybe flying or selling airplanes or whatever that may be. Or it can just be a hobby.
It's really cool to see you just like have that goal and see like this opportunity, like you said, the door to open in your life, and then you just chase after it. That's awesome, man. I'm curious, like what is the process you use? Like I think about the vlog that you've started, the podcast, the pilot's license, everything else that you've done, even starting your own production company. Like what is your process that you kind of use, or is there a process for starting something new when you have an idea?
I don't know if I necessarily think about that. I'm someone who tries really hard at things, but I don't really think about what I'm doing. I probably could be more effective if I sat down and had a plan, but I just took an afternoon, like for example, my pilot's license, and explored every single option there was, wrote it all out, and just sent it and just went with one. And I was like, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but it worked out. And it just so happened to be like exactly what I was looking for. In terms of the vlog, I don't really think I tried too hard. I just was like, I'm just going to document my life and see what happens. And I went to football games. My buddy was like, oh, I'm like, I did a Lime scooter vlog, and my buddy was like, let's just make a really dramatic film about me jumping like 12 stairs on a Lime scooter. And it was awesome and super fun. I'm all about not thinking and just doing it and chasing after like your instincts. And I think that that has really helped me accomplish a lot of things in a short amount of time. Obviously, there's a time to plan things out, but when it comes to other things, I think you can kind of just go with the flow and hope it. If it doesn't work out, like there are plenty of times where things have not worked out for me, but if it doesn't work out, then you can just get back up and try again, and hopefully it'll work out the next time.
That's awesome. So, Patrick, when you think about the relationships you've had in your life, are there any standout moments or standout stories where you really think that because you put in the time and energy into the relationships, which I know are incredibly important to you, that that really paid off in a big way, or it really brought you closer to achieving your mission? Any specific stories you can think of?
Yeah, relationships can be hard and they can be scary, especially when you're like an underdog in the sense, and you're chasing after someone who is like the boss or someone who's going to give you that job offer. And honestly, I think that even though it's scary and you could be rejected, people nowadays are looking for people who are willing to take those crazy steps to get in touch with them, or to, I don't know, like get the job that they want. The story that comes to mind is I was at a football game freshman year, and I was just fascinated. I love football, but I was more, fascinated by with all the camera equipment all around, naturally, And so I saw this camera guy, and he had this big camera on his shoulder, and I was like, I want to like get a contact. How would I do this? Can I go up to him? And I literally was like pacing back and forth, like about to like, oh, nope, too scared. Oh, I'm gonna go up to him. Nope, too scared. And I finally like got the courage and went right up to him, and I said, hey, like, do you have a second? And he was like, yeah. And I said, hey, like, I'm super interested in doing like video production. Like, can you point me, like, give me the contact for your boss? And he did, and he was super nice about it. And I was expecting him to be like, oh, get away, kid. But he was super nice. And then I emailed the boss, and I came in and interviewed with him. And then he offered me a job as like an entry level cameraman. And I just gained so much experience from that. And it was so, I came in with no experience. And like, he was like, oh, like, but if you're passionate about it, I think like you'll love it and you can grow. And I don't know, I think that's just a small example of how like a relationship like with someone can like really propel your like your career. And now that this guy who gave me the job, his name's Josh Monk, like he has trained me all last year on how to be a technical director for the ACC network, which is basically someone who like pushes buttons, I don't know, in a simple sense. And I'm going to work my way up to be a director one day, hopefully by my senior year or something like that. But he's just really poured into me, and I've just been super, super blessed. I have so many people over the years like have the faith in me to like trust me. And even though I've let them down, like they still see potential, and they give me another shot. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think relationships are the most important way to grow yourself, especially like to grow a business, like with word of mouth or other things like that.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I think myself, and I'm sure a lot of people listening can definitely relate to that feeling of like seeing someone, you're like, oh wow, it'd be really great if I could go up and talk to them, and like kind of that back and forth, like, oh, do I do it? Do I not? Do I do it? Do I not?
Right.
That is hard, right? It really is hard. And I've been through that many times.
Do you have an example of a story where you've been kind of like that?
Yeah, definitely. Let's see. I remember my first week at NC State, probably like exactly 1 year before you and I met. I kind of showed up here on campus, and I was like, okay, I want to try and do this differently than most people do it, right? I don't want to just take something away from this school. I want to try and give something back, and I want to try and meet some people, right? If there's one thing that my parents instilled in me when I was a kid was that, hey, you got to go out and meet some people because you never know what sort of opportunities or doors it's going to open, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so I literally just Googled like who's in charge of entrepreneurship at NC State. And I found this guy, his name's Lewis Sheets. And I can't remember if I gave him a call or if I shot him an email, but I hit him up that first week of school, and he said like pretty much immediately, he was like, hey, yeah, come downtown to my office, to the space that we have in downtown Raleigh, and we'll come just like, meet and greet and learn more about what you want to do here. And I was like, whoa, this is amazing.
That's
Like
so
I'm just
cool.
a
Right.
first week freshman here at NC State. And yet here I am like talking to this person who basically created the entrepreneurship programs from scratch, like 15, 20 years ago.
So
And
cool.
so I got to go meet with him, and that, we talked for like 2 or 3 hours, and that ended up leading, like, he invited me that night to the first entrepreneurship mentors program, which led to me meeting pretty much every single other mentor I've ever met from that one program and that one night when I went and met with Lewis. So you never know what something's going to lead to. And as hard as it may be, it's like taking that step, like getting past the flinch of like, ooh, I don't know if I should reach out. Every single time I've done it, it's always ended up being for the better. Even if the person said like, oh, I'm too busy right now, I can't talk now or whatever. Never had somebody who just said like, oh no, like how dare you reach out to me, or like,
Right. No, that
how
just
dare
won't
you,
happen. They just
how
won't
da-
respond.
how dare you think that pretty much like 90% of the time, people are like super willing, and actually it's almost like you're kind of taking away an opportunity for them to give back if you don't reach out to them.
Right.
So
Exactly.
that's been huge for me, is just having that realization of like, wow, people really do want to give back. And all it takes is just reaching out. So same way that we talked about it for, when you're starting something new, do you have like a process or a set of principles for when you're trying to make relationships? Like, is it very intentional? Is it kind of just butterfly effect? It just kind of happens. I'm really curious to hear.
Yeah. I think one of the most important things when you're meeting someone the first time is be yourself and be genuine, because people are smart and they can pretty much read right through your BS, I like to say. I remember like when I first got to NC State, I was like, oh, I have to be this mature, like smart, like person who is, knows what I'm talking about. And it didn't really work out. And there's just times where like I didn't make those friends or I didn't get those opportunities. And really just, it was trial and error. And I was like, wow, like when I'm myself and I'm talking as Patrick, not this other guy who I don't know, I'm talking as Patrick, like that's when I really have the better conversations and I like meet people and actually obtain those relationships. um, and I also think that like people are super, super talented, and there are way more people out there who are so much more talented than me. And I can learn and grow from people by like reaching out to them and collaborating with them, kind of like with you, with like doing vlog stuff or bouncing ideas off of each other for different video ideas, or when we're working at 9 Miles or things like that.
For sure. I appreciate it. So Patrick, this has been an awesome conversation today. I'm curious, like from your perspective, what is one thing that you try to live or try to embody in your own life that's worked well for you that you think I could take away or people watching or listening could take away as kind of an action step to implement in our own lives?
If there's been like one theme to everything I've been talking about, is that like chase after what you love. I think that's like the simplest form or the simplest idea of how to be successful and also how to be happy. Like it's easy to work every single day of your life if you love doing it. But if you don't, then it's going to be hard and you're going to get burnt out and it's not going to be fun. So as long as you're doing what you love and you're chasing after it and you're working hard, I don't think you can go wrong.
That's awesome. No, I'll definitely take those words to heart. I appreciate it. So Patrick, where can people go if they want to get a hold of you to learn more about what you do or the things we talked about today?
Yeah, so you can contact me through Instagram or Facebook. It is Patrick Meehan is my personal, and Patrick Meehan Co. is my business. And then I would say you can also have a website. It's just patrickmeehan.com. If you search Patrick Meehan in Google, I've worked really hard to make it so I come up. So you can go ahead and do that. And I would love, on a serious note, to talk to anyone who hears this and has questions or is interested. I'm not a wealth of knowledge. I'm just learning from experience, but I would love to help in any way I can. So feel free to reach out to me on Instagram or send me an email, or if you want, you can send me an email. We can get on a phone call and talk. So yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. And again, just want to say thank you. Like you were a big part of the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing now, both on the vlog side and the podcast side. So I really can't thank you enough. And I hope you realize the impact that you have on other people, even if it's not obvious every single day.
Yeah, I really appreciate those words. It can be straining sometimes, keep doing this every day, but in the end, like those words, like when I hear you say that, it's like, wow, like what I'm doing is worth it. Like, it's crazy like how small like I could think something is and how big it is to someone else. And that goes like for things that you do that I think and look up to you for as well. So I appreciate you saying that. This has been so fun. I would love to do it again.
Yeah, for sure. I wonder if really the end version of your mission includes something about storytelling with an impact on other people. Is when you're able to do something and tell a story that invokes an emotion or invokes an impact in somebody else's life.
Yeah, I feel that for both of us. I feel like we're similar in that way and we have those same passions.
Yeah, 100%. Well, Patrick, thank you so much. Thank you everybody for tuning in, and we will see you again soon.